be over the levels of sexual addiction. This will be a continuance of the lecture that you watched previously over sex addiction. The current climate of sexuality is that everyone should be able to enjoy sex. There is this sense of sexual freedom for everyone, including women in the last couple decades, of being able to express their sexuality and that it should be something of an enjoyable nature. This also incurs that excess is inevitable, so we might have time periods in our life where our sexual libidos are higher. It sends this message that it's okay to have a lot of sex, especially if you're a younger age or something like this. For example, masturbation is a example of excess. That what is excessive masturbation may be different from, back in the day to currently right now. However, this evolution of sexual thinking that everything should be enjoyable does leave out those who have sexual compulsions that they don't actually want. This message could be construed that sex addicts just need to find a way to enjoy their sexuality. We don't want to send that message. Sexual addicts actually feel pain and consequences from their sexual compulsivity, which is hard for people to recognize that they aren't actually enjoying every aspect of the sexual behaviors, because it's just the presence of excessive sex. Because that it's excessive, it can happen on its own without actually being a sexual addiction, as individuals have different levels of sexual libido. Similarly to substance abuse or substance addictions, problems with sex do not necessarily mean that they have a sexual addiction. Addiction comes with a preoccupation and compulsivity in which the brain begins to see that behavior as survival. There are 3 levels of sex addiction. The first level is generally socially acceptable and tolerable sexual behaviors. Level 2 then moves to behaviors that are more victimizing and are usually illegal. And level 3 is the most grave, in that there are severe consequences for the victims and legal consequences for the addicts. And not every sex addict will participate in all 3 levels. Sexual addictions are culturally acceptable. They're often widespread in practice. This can include sexual behaviors like masturbation, compulsive relationships, pornography, prostitution, anonymous sex. Yes, prostitution is considered a level 1 considered level 1 of sexual addiction, because the victimization is considered very low. Now, this can be debated on whether the victim is the prostitute or because it is an illegal act in most of the states in the U.S. It does come with less negative consequences or less legal consequences. Now, of course, level 1 does have negative consequences in that they can impact a person's life, including finances, relationships, time. Level 1 addicts often go through episodes like sex binges, and they rationalize it not being a problem when they're experiencing level 1, because the public usually sees level 1 behaviors as just a nuisance and not necessarily a problem. Level 2 sexual addiction is more intrusive and often warrants legal actions. These include things like exhibitionism, voyeurism, or a combination of voyeurism and exhibitionist together. Exhibitionism is somebody who might be a flasher, the raincoat flashing women. Voyeurism would be the peeping toms, those who look in on people or try to take pictures of them underneath their skirt or something like that. Voyeurism and a combination of voyeurism and exhibitionism is linked together through masturbation. So this might be a peeping Tom who's looking through a window but also masturbating at the same time, or somebody who is flashing but then, masturbating in public or something. Indecent calls and liberties or mini rapes are another part of level 2. The indecent calls are people calling and making suggestive remarks on the phone. Indecent liberties, the reason they call them mini rapes is because this is actually inappropriate touching, such as rubbing up against someone, like in a train or in a crowd or something like that. Level 3, the common element of sexual addiction is that its significant boundaries are being crossed. Now, the sexual behaviors can span all 3 of the levels once they reach level 3, but they can include can progress to a specific level that might include child molestation, incest, rape, and violence. Now, the behavior of child molestation in itself or rape does not equate actually having an addiction. So just because somebody molests a child or rapes somebody does not mean that they are automatically a sex addict. But if they are a sex addict and they reach level 3, it can reach severe points, severe boundaries, or crossing of severe boundaries. The levels are really arbitrary concepts, but serve to help understand the wide range of behaviors in sexual addiction. And in this level, the sexual addict reaches a high level of pain. And remember that deviant behavior does not automatically mean a presence of addiction. All 3 of these levels do transcend personality, gender, and socioeconomic status. That means it doesn't discriminate. That doesn't mean there's a specific type of person that can reach all 3 of these levels. Behaviors within and in between these different levels reinforce one another. So the peeping Tom might reinforce the rape or the violence. The sexual behavior in each level is also connected with behaviors due to other kinds of addictions. So let's say they're drinking, they get, their sexual addiction starts to play out in certain behaviors where they might be more likely to participate in level 1 or level 2 actions because of the alcohol use. Now, Carnes talks about 11 different types of sex addicts, and so some of these will be different between each level, but there's fantasy sex addicts, seductive role sex addicts, anonymous sex, so those who participate in anonymous sex, paying for sex or trading for sex, voyeuristic sex, exhibitionist sex, intrusive sex, that might include rape, pain exchange, object sex, or sex with children. Because of the advantages of the internet, cybersex has become a huge gateway into sexual addiction or compulsivity. Think about the anonymity of addiction. It's easily accessible. It also contributes to sex addicts' impaired thinking by providing a way to increase their denial. Oh, I'm not actually participating in these behaviors. It's just the virtual world. So if you think of an addict who has pedophilia, they might participate in child pornography, but not in an attempt to reduce their actions of actually participating in that sexual behavior. But this participation in the virtual world can just perpetuate that preoccupation talked about in the previous lecture, and ritualization, which again intensifies with each repetition into the sexual behavior. 40% of most extreme cybersex users are actually female. Cybersex increases a rapid escalation. It often leads to high frequency and variety of use. New behaviors quickly become obsessions because of the availability of the internet. If you think about the different types of behaviors in pornography, that might increase the obsession to participate in those behaviors. It increases the escalation of withdrawal from your current relationships, and it accelerates already present addictive behaviors. So again, if you participate in cybersex, you might also participate in other addictive behaviors sexually, or addictive behaviors like drugs and alcohol. The simple act of a computer or internet becomes sexualized. It starts to trigger these people. I've worked with some sex addicts where just the click of a keyboard reminds them of their looking for the escorts or looking at pornography, and it triggers in their brain whenever they hear that, or when they're just simply having to work on the computer, it automatically pops into their head. Arousal template, this takes place in the brain. It's formed around the ages of 5 to 8, and it influences our outside control. So basically what happens when abuse is involved, and how might it be incorporated into our arousal template. Problems occur when the neuro pathways become distorted. This can be due to families that are rigid about talking about sex, so not really expressing what sex is or how to participate in it. Early childhood sexual experiences, losing your virginity at a young age, sexual abuse. It basically comes down to people becoming aroused in ways that are self-destructive or not functional. So there are 3 neural pathways in the brain. The most primitive causes us to be sexually aroused by others. Then there's the neurochemical romance. So these are the neurotransmitters that produce arousal, intensity, and obsession. And then there's the attachment neuropathway that makes us attached to those people, those experiences, and the hormone. And this arousal template can become distorted due to sexual rigidity in the home, early childhood experiences, or sexual abuse.